I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking to the wonderful Ashley Walters all about the Netflix series Adolescence. And starting off, every time I've heard that you talk about this role, you very much described how the center of this character for you in playing Bascom was about him wanting to understand the why of this case, and the fact that he was a dad kind of felt more important to you even than him being a police officer in the story. And I was interested in how you found that early on in the scripts and the way that that really centered developing and building this character in so many ways.
So it didn't it didn't center and help me develop building the character in the beginning at all. I was very kind of one dimensional with it in a sense of like I got the script. Steve had rang me and told me that this would be the best role for me. I've never played a role like this ever before in my life. And I was like, well, I played a copper before and a few other things. And he was like, no, but not a copper like this. So I kind of immediately kind of read the script, and on the surface, it's an amazing script. You can't deny that. But I started delving into what it was like to be a detective and to be a copper rather than the feelings or the crux of what the actual show is about. It was only kind of when I got on set and started rehearsing that I realized like all of that stuff that I'd kind of learned in my research process or whatever was kind of irrelevant, to be honest, because it all centered around, this man being a father at the core of everything. And the way that this case affects him is different to any other case that he's been involved in.
Right. And it's interesting as well, because to your point of he's never been involved in a case like this, we see so many things that tell us how experienced he is, but for everybody involved in this, it's the first time they've had to deal with something of this scope. And I was interested in how you approach that, because it's also a space where this character can't really let his own emotions out during it.
Yeah, of course. And like again, I'll go back to being a dad. I think it was the way. If you look at the way Bascom kind of deals with Jamie, it's like it is actually like a father-son relationship. It's like he's a lot of the time it was like seeing your own child in that position. What would you do? How would you have to deal with it? Even though you have to follow procedure, you have to investigate, interrogate the situation. But there's some level of kindness within that. There's some level of understanding, because I guess the moment he goes into that bedroom and he sees Jamie on the bed, and he wets himself and all of that stuff, it's like it's a kid. Bottom line is it's a kid, and straight away, I think if you're any decent adult or decent human being, your mind is going to go to why would they have done something like this, or actually who made them do something like this. Do you know what I mean? Where did this come from? And I think like that is his the process in his mind all the way through.
Mhm. And I've also heard you talk about in kind of stepping into this project that once you actually stepped into the rehearsals, you kind of realized how monumental of a task this was going to be to accomplish with everything. And I was interested in kind of once you realized how challenging it was going to be in such a great creative way, how you kind of broke it down or made it feel manageable for yourself.
Yeah, it was a tough one. It was so I can't lie. I've spoken about it before. It was very difficult, kind of understanding how I was going to achieve such a monumental task. I kind of turned up to set with a bad back. I was a few days out from everyone else, so I missed a few days rehearsal. Um, and yeah, so and like I didn't want to be the weakest link in the group, so it was a lot of days, a lot of evenings after work, just struggling and running the script over and over and over again until I got the words. But I think the key to kind of getting it and it sinking in was the minute I started to let go of worrying so much about everything. Um, you have like this great thing called muscle memory that kind of does a lot of the work for you, even though you don't know it's doing it. And I had a conversation with Phil, our director, and he was just like, "Stop caring." And the minute I stopped caring, the words just started coming. I knew where I was meant to be, And I actually started enjoying myself a lot more. But before that point, there was a lot of pressure, you know.
And it's also this experience and this style of filmmaking that's kind of leaning on two different disciplines, because you have the nuances of acting for the screen and knowing that the camera is coming really close to you, but also in terms of the exercise of shooting in one take, it feels very theater based, and you don't break away from scenes. You have all the moments in between. And so, what was that space of kind of balancing between those two sides of this art form?
Tough. You know, it's something you really had to kind of. There's a fine line that you have to straddle. You want to keep the authenticity of like a great kind of screen performance, but you know, you got all of those other bits of like stage that you have to kind of take under your wing as well. But it's just one of those things. It's like you start it, and once it starts, that's it. You've got no choice but to go on this journey. So you may like there was moments where I would say a line, and my mind starts to go, I wish you didn't say it like that. But it doesn't matter. You know, you can't. There's nothing you can do. You just got to go with it, and hopefully, it's kind of like a butterfly effect. That has an effect on how someone else is going to say something else, and you know, it changes the piece. It's like a kind of a constantly changing piece of art, and so you know, something to be enjoyed.
And going back to earlier, you were mentioning that you did obviously do a whole lot of research, and you know, I know a lot went into that opening sequence where they come into Jamie's house for the first time. How did the research that you had done really help in terms of just even the choreography and the way that you felt like he was stepping into Jamie's room when he was bringing him in for the first time?
It did. I think the research kind of gave me the the body language and you know I guess the confidence and the you know the powerful tools that you get from the police. I actually went on a police raid as well in Liverpool. With actually Stephen Graham's cousin is in the police force in Liverpool, and they set up a raid for me to go on. So Philip Barantini and myself, we went on this raid. It was a slight anticlimax because we hit the wrong place. The raid was wrong, whatever, all the information was wrong. But you know, I got all the understanding of the technical side of what they do. Um, but I feel like it was good for me in that sense. But like I said to you before, everything everything is kind of procedure up until that moment that he opens that kid's door and sees that young boy. You know, the idea of what the perpetrator is, the animal that perpetrator is, or whatever, before you actually physically see them. Um, you're gunning for that person. You just want that person behind bars for what they've done. You want justice and whatever. And you can tell, you can tell what I tried to add to the performance anyway for Baskin was like, there's a little moment where you see him kind of stop when he walks through the door, where he realizes that this is just a child. And actually that changes everything from that point on.
Did you kind of feel like when they're sitting in the van together going to the station that that's him reconciling almost with that idea of what he thought he was walking into, and then sitting in front of this kid that's crying because he's scared?
Yeah, exactly. So, you're seeing this child at his weakest, and he's just a child. And anyone who's anyone who's a parent that is in that position, you're gonna feel for that child. You know, it's gonna change how you see things and how you handle things. And like I said before, that's exactly where the questions start to be asked. Who are his parents? Why is he in this position? You know, all that stuff starts going through your mind. Whereas if it was an adult, I don't think you wouldn't be thinking about that stuff at all.
And before they go into the interrogation room with Jamie, there's a moment where he's saying to Misha, who's his partner on the job, do you want to go over the plan again? And that kind of felt like this sense of he's someone who really likes to make sure that he's prepared for every situation, but also, especially for this case, he really understands how high the stakes are. And yet when you're in the interrogation room, it feels prepared, but also they're responding to the answers that they get, or when Jamie isn't really giving them anything at the beginning because they don't know how he's going to respond to their questioning. And so, how did you make sure that it felt really prepared by him, but also very much responding in the moment?
Yeah, I guess it's the same as kind of preparing for the job. It was really like knowing that I had all the answers. I had all the control in that scene. And then it was a case of like forgetting about that and just responding to what's going on in front of me. So sometimes Owen, he would respond in different ways. He'd be saying the same word, but a different intention behind them. And I'd proper have to stay alive to be listening for that, to see where I could take it. And like even before we was talking about where he's kind of preparing in the office with Misha, he's a very meticulous kind of guy, and he understands the process, especially in our justice system, is one that if you get even the smallest thing wrong, i.e., evidence, in the questioning, or any part of the process, that perpetrator could walk away in court. They could get found not guilty just for those sort of things. So he's desperate to make sure he gets it right. But once again, you get inside the kind of the real scenario, the real situation, and nothing's what you planned, but you must plan.
And there also has to be this really natural rhythm between him and Misha. How did you and Faye Marseille kind of really just find that natural rhythm together for a scene like that? Because it's very much the two of them bouncing off one another in terms of who's taking the lead at any given moment.
um, just after work, going to get dinner, just talking like all the time on the phone and stuff like that. Like in situations like that, like if you're going to be playing someone's colleague, someone that you work with for that amount of time and a friend, I don't think any of the work can help you, to be honest. If you want there to be something that really feels real on screen, then it has to come from us kind of really like liking each other. You know what I'm saying? And then like Faye is just one of the coolest people in the world. So we just got on like a house on fire, and straight away we were locked in, we were already connected, and we shared a bit of kind of stress around like the project that we was doing. I would always open up to her about like how much words I've got to learn and how stressful it is. So basically, outside of work, we didn't really want to talk about work. We just talked about life. And yeah, like I said, she's just cool. So it was easy. It was easy to kind of make that feel real.
I love that. And one of the details, there's so many great, wonderful small details for each character interspersed throughout the scripts. And one of the details for Bascom that I thought was great was the whole thing of him giving up smoking and whenever he wants to smoke a cigarette, he's eating an apple, even though he gets acid reflux from it. But there's those moments where you kind of see him grab one and you know exactly how he's feeling in that moment. And how did you find the script just giving you lots of little details like that really fleshed out this character for you?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was loads of. I mean, that Apple thing was so special because, um, believe it or not, before I got the script, I was already I was already obsessed with pink ladies. That had become my thing. So I was eating like 4 pink ladies a day. Like it was crazy. And then I got the script and I saw that about the character, and I was like, those little things that happen that you're like, all right, this is meant to be. I'm meant to be doing this part because I was prepared for it. Little did I know that there's arsenic in in the seeds of apples. I didn't know that. It's like poison in apple seeds. And if you were to eat too many of them, you could die. I had got so bad with apple that just because I didn't want to go to a bin, I was eating the stalk, seeds, every part of it. So I was a professional apple eater before I even came to do this job. So
You went completely method for
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Baskin was perfect for me. I was eating a lot of apples. It was Phil did ask me if I felt all right, but yeah, it worked out.
There's also the aspect for him that we see all his colleagues very much looking to him for answers of things. Someone's trying to talk to him about the accommodation that they're going to need to figure out for Jamie after the questioning. And you kind of see that he's like, we can't even think about that right now. We just have to get through this first bit. And what was the impact that you found for him of just being someone that everybody is expecting to have all these answers, but even he doesn't have them yet?
It's something that I go through in my own life a lot more. wasn't far-fetched from me at all. Yeah, that's the life of a director, to be honest. Someone that's leading something and orchestrating loads of people who have their own great set of skills, that you delegate to, but sometimes need a little bit of guidance. And it does become stressful, but I kind of lean on my own experience in that sense. You have to stay calm. You have to stay patient, and try and get through it, and try and kind of get everyone to understand. Although you want to do your bit in this, in these incremental steps, it's one step at a time, and this is the first step that we got to do. And that was also important for how the case panned out. Like I said before, it's very easy to go through things, rush things, and then you make mistakes, and at the end of it, that person is walking away from court because you can't convict them.
And once they're in the interrogation room and they're questioning Jamie, there's the moment where ultimately they reveal their hand of, we have the surveillance videotape and we have complete evidence of what you did and we know that you're the person, even though up to that point he still keeps saying, I didn't do anything, I didn't do anything, I didn't do anything. How did you make sure that by the time it got to that, it kind of like felt like the right moment of them having that reveal to him?
Um, I mean, it wasn't really. I feel like he was keeping that in his back pocket. I think the purpose of him asking all those questions and whatever was to see if he would say. It's just simply that. It was just like, because I feel like for the audience, you're always assuming that it's mistaken identity, right? The first time you watch this, you're never thinking that it's going to be this kid. But Bascom knows from the beginning. He knows before he goes into that house, like what he's about to deal with. And yeah, so for the whole time, he's holding on to it. And I guess there's a slight hope that there's a little piece of humanity that will come out, and that, the kid will be vulnerable and admit to what he's done, like you would expect a kid to. And I think actually that would have helped him in court, in the other processes going down the line. But he didn't. So there was no other way to do it but to throw the what they call it, the ace card,
Yeah.
the trump card, not the trump card. The ace card sounds better.
He also mentions the fact that shortly after midnight, he was the person that had to go to Katie's mum and tell her, your daughter's no longer here
Yeah.
because of what happened, which also gives us that detail of he's been up the entire night because they raid the house at 6 in the morning.
Mm.
And was that kind of the driving factor for you behind that moment where he's talking to Jamie and he's kind of saying, don't you have anything that you want to say to Katie's mum, and telling him about the fact that he did that last night?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the kids lied that whole time, until the evidence has been put in front of him, and shown no signs of remorse. And I think at that point, I think that's probably the key point before we go into episode 2, where you really see Bascom like, I just can't understand this. Like, I just can't understand how a child as meek, mild, and small and innocent as you has done something like this. And you're not repenting. Like, you're not giving me anything about why, or what pushed you to this point. And I think it's difficult for any parent to understand that. And you're kind of like, it's like, someone's holding up a mirror at that point as well, because remember, his son goes to the same school. It could have been his son. I mean, he doesn't have the greatest relationship with his own son, so I think there's a lot of things coming into his mind at that point. Um, but um, but I think more than anything, he's scared.
And as you just mentioned, his son goes to the same school and is just 2 years above Jamie and Katie in their year group. And, did that really shape for you the decision that he makes to go to the school? Because again, Misha points out, we could have sent someone more junior, and he really feels like it needs to be him in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. That is a big part of it. Is I think from episode 2 kind of going forward, it is about it's less about the justice now, you know, even though that is really important and tying up the case and tying things up, but it's more about his own personal kind of want to understand what's going on. You know, we see some amazing kind of insights into the school system, into how teachers are struggling, into, you know, how other students are interacting with each other. And it really kind of hits home to him, you know, about what's going on. And then actually the kind of final nail in the coffin for him is realizing that, you know, oh, I've been neglecting my son in some sort of way as well. And that kind of, you know, nicely ties everything up for him.
And there's also that experience of questioning Jamie's classmates, you know, when he's questioning Jamie's friend Ryan or Katie's best friend Jade, and just kind of really having very different responses from all of these teenage kids. What was your experience in filming those scenes? Because the actors playing those roles are phenomenal in this series.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better cast, to be honest. Um, you know, I'm not going to say working with kids is always great, because sometimes it's not. But these were kind of A1 child actors, if I'm honest with you. And every time we shot these scenes, they made me step my game up a lot more. And it was such a joy to kind of knowing that you're going to step into these scenes with them. You're always getting kind of, your heart starts beating a bit more when you're going to go and step into that scene with Ryan. You know, you just come from the playground, you know, you're about to do that scene, and you're excited because you don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how he's going to react this time, how he's going to respond to certain questions. And all of that determines how I kind of perform as well. So we had a great time shooting that stuff, and, you know, talking about those scenes and rehearsing those scenes and kind of pulling different things out of different lines that maybe sometimes the guys never thought existed, or they didn't see in the lines in the beginning. But yeah, it was really enjoyable.
And one of the sequences that's just incredible in terms of the directing and the movement of everybody in that whole episode is the moment where Ryan climbs out the window and the camera follows, and then Bascom has to kind of go out the window and go after him, and you're running after him. And I know you were mentioning earlier that you know, you started this project with a back injury as well. What was your experience in terms of just filming that sequence and everybody kind of collectively figuring out the logistics of how to accomplish it?
You know what? I like you. I like you because you just gave me an out. I know you were trying to help me with the run thing, because you were like, I know you started with your back injury. She helped me. That's proper. I like it. I like it. Yeah, no, that was a good scene. I was watching the BTS the other day, and, you know, another camera somewhere else filming Ryan come out the window, and then the camera comes out, and then I come out, and I kind of fall straight down behind the wall. But no one ever sees that because the camera's on Ryan at that moment. I get up in time to run. Um, it was listen, it was an amazing kind of experience. I must say though, although I'm not running at full speed, because you have to like time it with the camera and the movement and stuff like that. It was the most tiring thing I've ever done in a while, because it just goes on and on and on, that run. And by the end of it, you know, on the takes that you guys see is kind of like the last, near enough the last take that we did, I think. Um, I just, by the end of it, there's so many lines in that last scene where I kind of pull him down off the fence. I literally just cut them all, because I just stopped saying them. I was just like, I got straight to the point because I couldn't breathe. I just couldn't breathe. Um, and that was the most natural and right. It was the right thing to do. It was the most authentic thing to do, as you would, you know. Um, but yeah, really enjoyable shooting all that stuff. Obviously, slightly dangerous, and, you know, you have to keep switched on because of the kind of moving cars and the motorbike and stuff like that. But we really enjoyed it, and it was so good to be able to pull it off in like a one take, because, you know, those things are so difficult. You know, if you want to make it harder for yourself, add stunts and VFX and all sorts of other stuff that we didn't need to really add. But yeah, it was real fun.
Because you just mentioned, obviously, he's so out of breath in that moment, and with how far they had you run, you were as well. Was the line where he's like, "Oh, I haven't run like that in years," was that always in the script, or was that something that
No,
came
no,
out of the moment for
that
you?
was that was an ad lib. That was an ad lib. That came from the moment. I was so tired. It's so bad, so bad. Most of the people that know me are like, "But bro, you're not even running. Like, you're not even running. Like, how come you couldn't catch that kid?" I'm like, "It's acting, but it's not about the speed. It's about how long that sequence goes on." It's like it's a long one for me.
I know, I can't believe that the camera team were running with all that equipment at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I shouldn't be complaining really, but
I also wanted to ask you about just filming that final scene between Bascom and his son, because I think, he's expressed some of his own internal worries of, I worry that I'm not a good parent, that I'm not the best dad for him. And it doesn't feel like the two of them fully mend everything in that instant, but it feels like they're both taking a step towards each other and kind of without saying it, saying, I want to try and make things better between us. And so I was interested in just finding that dynamic and all the emotion that kind of goes into that moment for him as well.
yeah, it's another one of kind of like with me and Faye, because me and Amari, we had such a great kind of relationship. Um, he's such a cool kid, man, and so confident, and willing to kind of just like open up and explore the characters as much as possible. He's a real craftsman, like he's an actor's actor, and so we really worked on that stuff in rehearsal. But my experience, I took him, his mom, and his brother who was down as well. I took them all to an escape room. I think if you ever want to learn about if you ever want to learn about a person, go to an escape room with them and get locked in somewhere and see how much they help you get out, because he didn't help me do anything. He did, and that's where our relationship proper started to blossom, because I realized what sort of kid he is. Typical teenager. But yeah, no, that's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful moment for us, and kind of where the penny drops for Bascom. They had that great scene before where you know he, he's teaching them about the emojis and the manosphere and all of that stuff. And I think that's kind of where Bascom realizes, potentially this could have been you, or you could be susceptible to these sort of kind of rabbit holes that people go down on the internet. Um, and then I think he realizes that he's not doing enough. Like, I think sometimes as men, as dads, you get caught up in like, I provide, I have to work all this time, I'm away all this time, and I provide, and I make sure my kids have got clothes on their back and food in their mouth and school's paid for, and all that stuff is great. But bottom line is you can't beat quality time um, with your child. And that's what he hasn't been doing. And the longer you don't do it, the longer you forget how to do it. I've realized that with my own kids. Sometimes I'll be sitting with my 8-year-old sometimes, and we're just looking at each other like, because you forget the art of communication. You forget how to have those conversations. You forget what you like talking about with each other. So um, I like the way we end it with them anyway, with them both putting their hearts on the line again, and being willing to go on that journey to reconcile. And it taught me a lot about myself as well. So glad I got to do it.
Yeah, well, it's a phenomenal series, and I loved your performance in it. So thank you so much for talking all about it. Really appreciate it, Ashley.
Thank you.